everybody. Welcome to So Many Sequels, your book club for movies. I'm Josh.
I'm Garrett.
And I'm David.
Welcome to week 3 of Party Like It's 1999 Vember, where we are this week discussing 10 Things I Hate About You. I'm super excited about this one. I've seen it a bunch. I'm sure you guys have too. It's a favorite for a lot of people. I think that people repeat watch it a lot, so excited to talk about that. If you haven't done so already, be sure you subscribe to the show on YouTube or in your favorite podcasting app. We're in all of those. And then follow us on Instagram at So Many Sequels Pod. Let's get into 10 Things I Hate About You. So, on the first day at his new school, Cameron instantly falls for Bianca, the gorgeous girl of his dreams. The only problem is that Bianca is forbidden to date until her ill-tempered, completely undateable older sister, Kat, goes out too. In an attempt to solve his problem, Cameron singles out the only guy who could possibly be a match for Kat, a mysterious bad boy with a nasty reputation of his own. All right, what's the box office breakdown of 10 Things I Hate About You?
Well, 10 Things I Hate About You opened April 2nd of 1999 in the number 2 spot with $8.3 million. That's about the equivalent of 15.7 today. It was number 2, just behind also what the other movie that opened that weekend, The Matrix, which brought in $27.7 million. So not a huge open there for The Matrix, but that movie would obviously go on to do really well over time. 10 Things opened just $100,000 over kind of counter-programming film, The Out-of-Towners, which is a remake of a Neil Simon film starring Steve Martin and Goldie Hawn. So it's very much an older folks movie compared to 10 Things going for that high school tween crowd. At number 4, you had Analyze This, and at number 5, you had Forces of Nature, riding out the top 5 with $6.2 million. 10 Things I Hate About You would go on to make about $38.1 million in the United States, which is about the same as about a $72 million run today. It would make estimated number about 15.3 overseas for a worldwide total of $53.4 million. All of that on a budget of around $13 million. So only about $3 million more than Office Space, which we reviewed last week. In 2024, that would be the equivalent of about a $24 million budget. So small budget, high reward. It made its money back. Not necessarily the strongest performance of the year, which I'll get into in just a second, but it made its money back, and obviously it had a huge impact because we're still talking about it here 25 years later. It was the number 53 movie of 1999, just ahead of Fight Club. That's right. It just beat out Fight Club by the slimmest of margins, and then it finished just behind Cruel Intentions, which it also is only about $200,000 off of in terms of that total. Number 1 movie of 1999, we've talked about many times, the Star Wars, The Phantom Menace, Sixth Sense, Toy Story 2, Austin Powers, and The Matrix round out the top 5 there. If you look at our picks over the last few weeks for movies that we picked from 1999, we didn't pick a single movie in the top 50 from that year. We had 10 Things was the highest with 53. Mystery Men was the number 68 movie of the year, and Office Space was number 121. So what I love about 1999, Josh, you talked about it being the greatest year in movie history, is that even the movies that weren't at the very top of the box office had staying power for whatever reason. These movies held on. And many of these movies that we've talked about this week or this month have outlasted some of the other movies that came out during that year. So I'm excited to talk more about 10 Things I Hate About You.
Yeah, me too. Let's go ahead and hear why you ultimately picked it. This was your pick of the week, David. So what made you pick 10 Things I Hate About You?
Well, I went with a very scientific strategy here. See, I considered a lot of different movies. I considered several movies. And some of the ones I went ahead and watched anyway, just for my own pleasure. Ultimately, I just decided to pull up Letterboxd and search 1999, and then I went with the most popular movie we hadn't already reviewed for the podcast.
Valid.
And to my surprise, the number 2 most popular movie from 1999, based on Letterboxd users, is 10 Things I Hate About You, just behind Fight Club. It beat out The Matrix and Star Wars and Cruel Intentions and all that. So I just thought that was really interesting, and I decided let's go for it because I like that movie too.
Okay. That's fair enough. Yeah, I've seen this movie several times. I think we gotta start kind of talking about how it's heavily influenced by Shakespeare, Taming of the Shrew in particular. I want to say I wish I could remember like the first time I saw it. I really can't. But I know I've seen it many times since I was younger, and I almost wonder if I saw it and related to school in some way. I feel like, the way it's got even some Shakespearean names just like lifted directly from the original text. We got there at Padua High School. We got Bianca. We got, what's his name, Patrick Verona. It makes
the main characters, their last name is Stratford.
yes, Stratford.
Yes.
It makes you. It's just really fun that way because it makes it easy to understand the Shakespearean connection there, and it just makes it much. It makes the source material more approachable. That's something I like about it. I feel like I've always come at it from that angle, and that's why I feel like I saw it in school or something. I feel like English teachers maybe show this, or at least some of them might. Certain scenes you might need to skip, but.
Yeah,
In terms of getting a modern day adaptation that kids would find enjoyable, I think it hits that pretty well. I still enjoy it. It was good. That was my first thoughts were solid.
Yeah, my first thoughts also were this movie's amazing. I, growing up, did not like rom-coms. They were not things that I enjoyed. But somehow this found it in way of my ether. I think it was my older sister, probably. And I can't fully remember if we had a VHS of this or if it was one of those that we had like recorded onto a VHS for our own selves. But one way or another, this movie had made it onto a VHS. I know that is true. And especially in like summers when I was a kid, I would just rewatch stuff. What else am I going to do? I'm a kid. I can't drive. I'm not, popular, and I ain't going out. I'm home most summers. That's kind of how that ended up being on a regular rotation. And there are so many connections in this movie for me that are just so childhood related that it's wonderful. I mean, Larissa Oglenick out there being Alex Mack on Nickelodeon. You've got Joseph Gordon-Levitt being on Third Rock from the Sun, which is a sitcom that I loved growing up. And then you have David Krumholtz, Bernard of the Santa Claus, and he is always the best part of everything he's in. And then, I would come to learn more about, I didn't know Heath Ledger and Julia Stiles at the time, but the other three, the side characters, if you will, those were the ones that I was really drawn to and drawn in by. And everybody, honestly, in this movie is just so wonderful. So yeah, this movie is one of the few rom-coms that I liked growing up, and it has continued to just be wonderful in my adult life.
I know exactly how you feel, because even though I'm not really a rom-com guy, this is the one that sort of, for whatever reason, works. It's always been one of my favorites. I remember watching it on TV, and I don't even really know what appealed to me about it, but it just seemed like the version of high school that I kind of like hoped was there, like this big, huge, sprawling environment, and kids just running around doing whatever they want in high school, like there seems to be very little actual control in this particular high school.
It's because they're privileged little white kids for the most part. I mean, let's
Seattle
talk about that right out the gate. It is the
You heard how Alice and Jenny talk to them kids.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's one of the things that I wanted to mention too, was like some of the dialogue feels a little hokey. And as my wife said, as much as teachers would love to talk to kids like this, they cannot. And, they're just telling kids, shut up, I hope you get your ass kicked and things like that. That ain't happening. But no, I remember being like 12, 11, whatever, and just thinking, man, Heath Ledger is like a really cool dude. I'm trying to point to him there. That's him right there. I just remember thinking like, man, that guy's cool. And they were, he had this really bad reputation and all that. And I just thought, that's cool. And then it's very funny. The side characters, Larry Miller, David Krumholtz, they're hilarious in this. And I want to talk more about them as we go. As I got older, I gained a bit of appreciation for it too, as I got to like Shakespeare a bit more. And this takes Taming of the Shrew and modernizes it in a lot of clever ways, sets it in that high school setting. Actually manages to find a slightly more palatable ending, because if you've ever read or seen the play of Taming the Shrew, I don't know if it's kind of a discomforting ending. And they make Petruchio, Patrick in this case, a little bit more likable, I think. So I thought that they did, I think it's a really good job overall. I think that this, in my opinion, I'm just one man. In my opinion, I think this is a standard bearer for the genre. Like, I think that this is, it has everything you want from a rom-com, from a teen high school movie. It does it all. So, my first impression is this is almost as good as I remember it being.
That's high praise. Yeah, so this movie, this is kind of unrelated to the movie itself, but this movie came out at a time when there's like kind of this renaissance of teen movies. I wonder how you guys feel like it stands out among like. I'm thinking like Clueless is in this era, not necessarily in this year, but late 90s. Clueless, She's All That, 10 Things I Hate About You. What makes this one continue to stand out, you think?
Well, I'll say this too. This movie came out just a few months before American Pie, which really was, I think, the movie that kind of like, I don't know if you could call it the crescendo, but it feels like that was the height. That's when we
shifted into more vulgar.
Yeah, like
teen,
it really took the teen thing
romp.
and yeah, took it to that next level. It's funny because both that movie and this movie feature 1 Week by the Bare Naked Ladies, but in very different scenarios. And I just kind of, I do look at that time period. It was a thing, and we talked about Final Destination a couple months back, and they made that movie was going to be adults, and because of the success of a lot of teen movies like Scream, and some of the more teen romances, they pushed that to being into high school. So the audience was strong for the teen genre back then. So I think this stands out even amongst that.
There's a weird relatability there that everybody kind of has. You can relate to somebody. David, you talked about thinking Patrick was cool. I remember growing up thinking like, man, it's fun to see David Krumholtz and Cameron on there, or Joseph Gordon-Levitt as Cameron on there, because those are two of the nerdy characters. And, and from that perspective, it's like, from looking at it, obviously from a male perspective, it's fun to see the little nerdy guy out there kind of competing for the girl that is like of everybody's kind of dreams. And I think that is something that is kind of that related. And David, I know that you were probably the Patrick Verona of your Arkansas school, where, so I'm sure that's why I'm sure that's why you connect with them there and are moving here after that. And, you probably had some kind of bad reputation with your Arkansas
I very
accent.
quickly became
sure
the David
very
Krumholtz
Australian
once I
for
got
them. So, but, for me, it's just so fun. Like, I also just think, again, I really enjoy a movie where it feels like people are enjoying it, and it doesn't just feel like they're acting. And man, this again has that, especially with those side characters, because the side characters, they are just truly enjoying what they are doing. I mean, David Krumholtz gets a penis draw on his face, and the way that he handles that whole scene is just so funny. I mean, that it's just brilliantly funny. Allison Janney is brilliantly funny. Daryl Chill Miller? I don't want to get it wrong, but I will.
Oh, Mitchell.
Mitchell, thank you. He's hilarious in his role, and so all of those side characters that they work in there, man, they really just have their moment to shine in every and they do a good job of calling these kids out, and I think that's why I like them, because this again is full of like really entitled kids, and so these side characters do a good job of kind of helping point that out and make sure that they are grounded in reality to some sense, and so I appreciate that dynamic between them, because they're all so up in their own high school teen drama stuff.
Yes.
And then you got her out there, Reginald's quivering member that she's writing, and it just really brings it back down to reality in such a fun way. Yeah.
His bratwurst.
Yes, the bratwurst.
There's such a teen melodrama at the center between Kat and Patrick and Cameron and Bianca, and then you have David Krumholtz. Just, I don't know what he's supposed to be. He's like this know-it-all about high school. It's like, over here you have your jock kids, and then these and I got kicked out because they said that I bought my Izod's at Macy's or something like that, right? It's so silly. And then
why do you have a David Krumholtz impression?
Huh?
And why is it good?
I don't know. I've been watching him for a long time. And then you got Larry Miller. I wish I could do a great Larry Miller impression, who plays the father of Kat and Bianca. This guy cracks me up in every scene.
So funny.
The delivery on every line. When he says, he goes, well, first off, when he tells her, he goes, do you know what this girl said? This 15-year-old girl, she gave birth. You know what she said to me? And they're like, I'm a crack whore who should have made my boyfriend wear a condom. He goes, close. But no, she said, I wish I listened to my father. And they're like, bullshit. And then when he goes, you can date when she does. And she goes, but she'll never date. And he goes, then you'll never date. Oh, I like that. Like his little asides are so
Yes,
funny.
he's hilarious. Maybe worst father ever though. Like just terrible
He's
fathering.
overly protective.
He's overly
One of my-
protective, but also like weirdly nonchalant in some ways.
Yes. When one of my favorite parts with him, and I always love an off-screen gag. He's working out with one of those little stretchy things that you don't really see anymore, and she says, "I want to talk about the prom," and he flings it, and you just hear like a long pause, and then glass shatter, and then they talk. The scene goes on. He does this thing where he talks about, "I'm down, I'm hip, I'm jiggy with it. I don't care how dope his ride is." That whole bit, and then there's a lull, and then you just see the thing come flying back into the thanks, Bill. I that's always going to be a thing that's going to get David is good off-screen humor, like just some guy off-screen heaving that back on screen. I love a good off-screen Bill. Yeah, the characters that aren't tied up in the drama in the middle get to really have fun and be silly and kind of highlight this sort of over the topness of the thing going on.
I wanted to talk a little bit about Kat herself and how, she also responds to her father. Like, it's like, you see why his kids have ended up this way, I think. But she is presented in a way that she's super unlikable. That's the worst part, at least initially. Like, and I wonder if that could have been a little better handled. Is this fair critique? Am I allowed to critique here at all?
Is it? Because I don't know enough about the original source play, but like if it's a Taming of the Shrew, I
she
hear
is
that,
supposed
and
to
my
be
initial
miserable,
thought
yeah.
is, I thought that they were supposed to make her somewhat unlikable. But I actually had a different take where I feel like their version of unlikable was just a woman who didn't want to take people's shit. Like that's really just. I don't feel like she was really unlikable, other than she was just like, I don't need all of this crap going on. She kind of made Bianca miserable, so I think that they could have made her a little more miserable, to be honest with you.
Perhaps.
Yeah,
I mean, she definitely has that good attitude, but like she has a bad attitude most of the time. Like, I laughed immediately when like the first thing we see is like she can't even stand to see a poster for prom. Like, can you let other people enjoy things? Is what I felt a little bit.
Yeah,
and then like the way she speaks to people is just like really condescending. And
she
it's
just
like
takes, she goes right for hostile.
A little
there's
reflection.
There's no build up. No, I mentioned this to my wife and she agreed. Is like there's a little bit of like, and this might be a deep cut for some people out there on the internet. There's a bit of a Daria Quinn relationship here. Like if you ever watched the show Daria, is you have one sister who's very much wants to fit in, wants to be cool, and a sister who's just totally over it. And I think this is a very late '90s thing. Is the very counterculture. Like I'm not into, sports and glitter. I don't glitter. I'm not into like all the things that like
Sports
society
and
tells me.
glitter.
I'm not into all the things that society says I should be into. I want to read. I want to listen to music that's not even on radio. Like all this stuff. And like you said, Josh, she does like take a very hostile approach with everybody immediately. Like there's no build.
And I think that's what I wonder what could be different today, because their version of making her hostile is making her just like an outspoken feminist, and that's kind of crappy. Like,
Exactly.
That's what I mean.
There's
like
the 90s.
Their idea of making her a shrew was to just make her strong.
It's her to like be pro standing up for yourself and to be to not go with trends and stuff like that. It'd be a very different movie with today's high school presentation, because I just don't know if I think cliques are obviously still around, but I think like all this bullying happens all through the phone now.
Probably.
So I agree, though. I think that there are some elements of character here that could have been better laid out. I feel like, for me, this might be the hottest take. I feel like Joseph Gordon-Levitt may be the weakest aspect of the movie. There's a lot of his character that feels, one, I think from a performance standpoint, I feel like sometimes he didn't feel confident in what he was saying. Two, his character comes off so entitled. So it comes off so entitled to Bianca's affection, right? Because he's like, I defended you when people called you snotty. I learned French for you, and I did this and that, and you don't even want me, right? And it's like, well, she didn't ask you to do any of those things, technically. Now, she did give you the idea that if you could get Kat dating, that maybe she could go out on a date. So but I think they could have laid that. They could have made Bianca a little bit more, have led him on a little bit more. But from her, if you watch the movie, she doesn't necessarily say, I can go out with you. She doesn't. So, I mean, like, he comes across really entitled. And
No, he makes a lot of
end.
assumptions as a high school boy often does.
There's that, and I'm not saying that, like, I hate it or anything for that reason, but I was watching it this time with a different eye as someone. I was trying to get my head in the head of someone who's watching this for the first time in 2024. What would they think of this character? And I think that's a bit of a thing. I think they could have laid a few of these story points a little bit better. You know, I go to the party scene because as a kid, I really thought that was a fun sequence, but it was way more scattered than I remember it being. Like, Bianca, like, walks away from what's his name? She walks away from Joey, Andrew Keegan's character Joey. She, like, walks away, and then, like, the next scene is her walking in through a different door, and he's on the other side of it, and I'm like, where did she go? She just, like, walked around the house once, and she's like, oh, him again. But yeah, I think that maybe there's a few more things you could do. You could make some criticisms, and you could come away with a little bit more rounded characters at some points. I think that sometimes when they try to incorporate the Shakespearean language, it feels a little forced, because they do it a couple times.
You didn't like the teacher's rap?
Man, I tell you what,
I didn't.
That was I enjoyed that. But my biggest moment of first, the Shakespeare stuff, was when at the end David Krumholtz again was standing on the stage in his Shakespearean suit, and I was like, "Oh man, he's the smoothest player in the game on this. He is the best character in this thing."
Yes.
But David, you had mentioned watching this from the I've seen this movie X amount of times. It's hard. It's fun to find something that you've never really paid attention to. And one thing that jumped out at me, and I didn't pay attention to it until it really kind of like made itself noticed, was how this movie was actually shot. We don't necessarily get into that a ton, but what stood out to me was there were not a ton of cuts just to get your attention and just to make you feel like between like dialogue. It was a lot of single shots with camera movement as actors were moving in and out and throughout the whole scene. And it was like blocking of a play. And obviously this is a Shakespearean influence piece of work. So that's not too surprising, but it really made me think that I just don't see that much anymore. I mean, you take this movie and you put it here, it would be cut up in bits and pieces and so much dialogue, and I just don't, it really added something to my watching of it, was really just kind of seeing how it was shot and when they made the cuts and how they made the cuts.
Yeah.
And those lingering shots and the rack focuses that they got and how this character would be, going back to the party whenever Cameron and Patrick come out and Kat is in the back after she'd hit her head, and she's just there the whole time, and that camera shot is just that whole time, and so everyone is just acting, and it was just I really enjoyed the artwork of that.
Yeah, they let some scenes run. They don't necessarily, refocus every time somebody says something. And so, yeah, like that's a great example of, she's in the background, she's kind of like fading, a little bit after hitting her head. And Heath Ledger and Joseph Gordon-Levitt's characters, they're just talking, and she's in the background. So there's what's the word? There's another layer of storytelling in the background where you can watch her slowly, and then she finally starts to collapse, and Heath has to catch her, and they move on. And then they walk up, that scene, they walk up the hill, and they sit on the swing sets. That's all like one take.
Yeah.
All like one shot.
It's great. It's so cool.
And they block it out, and they play it out. And there's a lot of other scenes like that. And there's a lot of, like, they said, okay, there's a lot of, there's a couple of great helicopter style shots too. Obviously there's the one at the end where they fly around the band, but, they have that shot over like the soccer fields. They have these kind of sweeping shots where you get like this big look at the school or this big look at the soccer setup and all that. So like, there was some cool ways that they brought this movie to life. I feel like we need to talk about some of the bigger production elements. We need to talk about Heath Ledger singing "You're Just Too Good to Be True," or what's the actual name of that song? But from Jersey Boys, I think. This was, I think, the part of the movie that I think became one of the more iconic elements is Heath Ledger singing to Julia Stiles from the stands. What do you guys think about this scene?
Yes, I mean, it earned Heath Ledger a nomination for MTV's Best Musical Performance.
Ooh, high praise.
In a
movie.
Back in the 90s MTV, hello.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was a big deal back then. A lot of people watched the MTV.
The MTV Movie
Awards.
Awards were a big deal back then. You're right. You're totally right. Yeah, I mean, it's a fun scene. I don't really know what to add to it. Like,
No, yeah.
I read that he studied some Fred Astaire before they shot the scene. He wanted to get some nice moves in there. It's not necessarily he doesn't necessarily have the most tremendous singing voice, but he went for it. And what feels funny to me about it is it feels very out of character for Patrick.
yeah, it does.
But that's the thing. See, you go back to the storytelling. That's where it's relatable to everybody because, for that relationship, you have a person who has this reputation. He is going out of the way to show interest in somebody else. It's kind of a flip situation, and he's doing this big grand gesture, and it's somebody that you wouldn't expect. And so that is something that can be like, relatable of I want someone to be doing that for me, or seeing someone who is not, got some kind of reputation, showing a softer side. That is a relatable desire I think a lot of people can have.
Well, and it comes off of one of the previous scenes. Again, coming back to what is David Krumholtz's character's name? We've said David Krumholtz several times. Mike. He tells him to set aside his dignity. He quotes some Shakespeare to him, and my underlying theory is that Mike had just read Taming of the Shrew, and then he realized that all the scenario around him was very similar, and he was like, wait a minute, you just paid that guy to go out with her. and so he's like quoting the play to them, and nobody else realizes it. Like, he's just like, man, this is going just like the play. I'm setting it up perfectly. And that's why he ends up going for the Shakespearean girl later. He tells her, hey, put your dignity aside, go out there and do something big and grand. And it worked somehow. It doesn't seem like the kind of thing that one cat would go for or Patrick would do, but it worked.
Yeah, but high school kids, it depends on what side of the bed they woke up on that day.
We need to talk about the classic high school, 90s high school trope of the bet or the paying or whatever it is. Like, that's always the payment. There always seems to be an aspect with these is like the betrayal of finding out that the only reason this relationship has any merit is because of like a bet or because of like money or something like that. I feel like I think She's All That, I think, is probably one of the other ones in that regard, but there's always something like that. There's always this relationship is founded on a lie.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And it was. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the part that I guess if it were gonna, you just kind of go, well, it's a happy, feel-good movie at the end of the day, isn't it? So just be happy. Because at the end, you're like, well, but he is kind of like a bad dude who did, like, agree to do this for money. Just because you decided you liked her along the way doesn't change that you did that. And you might again. But whatever, you're 17, it's fine. You're not going to, you'll break up next year.
She's moving across the country next
Right,
year.
it don't matter. It's high school. It don't matter.
What else we got, boys? Are we wrapping up? Final thoughts here on this lovely little rom-com?
Yeah, I don't know. The only other thing I want to mention is I did see a TikTok the other day. Because it's been 25 years, I think someone asked Julia Stiles, that's her last name, right? I'm saying that right. Julia Stiles, if she would read the poem, and she did at some kind of convention somewhere. She read the 10 Things poem that she reads at the end of the movie. And
That's funny.
It is very tearful. I think I don't know if Nikki cried this time watching it. I won't say because she'll tell me she either did or didn't. But it is a very emotional thing. Julia actually got emotional reading it again.
Really?
And I have looked up the sonnet. It's very funny because I say funny. It's very well rewritten by Kat because the whole idea of it is like, there's so many things that I could find wrong with you, this particular sonnet. That's the idea of it. There's so many things I could find wrong, but my heart loves you in spite of anything that my eyes or ears or anything, my mind could come up with. Like, I love you in spite of anything that could be thrown in the way. And so bringing that around and sort of bringing around the whole Shakespearean aspect of it by the end is very fun.
All right. Well,
that's all I got.
Then let's get into our final thoughts, right?
Yeah, final thoughts and ratings.
Yeah. So I'll start with mine. I think that this is still one of the quintessential teen movies of the late 90s. It's still relevant. I think largely because of how it leans into its Shakespeare source material. That story is also timeless, so it has made this timeless, I think. Great young stars at the beginnings of their careers. It's 4 out of 5 for me.
I agree, 4 out of 5. It isn't quite a perfect movie, but it will always be an enjoyable movie for me. I could rewatch this anytime and find something different to pick out. And it created an interesting little legacy of Shakespeare-style adaptations. We had She's the Man. Just this last year, we had Anyone But You. I really enjoy it. 4 out of 5 for me.
And then I will just call and raise you all a half a star, because I'm going to drop a 4.5 in there. Again, I didn't like rom-coms growing up, and so for me to be able to find something that is attachable to this, truthfully, I mean, if you want to be real, growing up, it was my giant crush on Larissa Oleynik. That's what got me interested, but the movie itself just kind of continued to sell after that. So for it to be able to suck me in at a younger age when I was not interested in movies like this, and to continue to be wonderful, 4.5.
Wonderful. High praise from all of
time
us
for the
here.
letterbox game now.
Yep. I don't remember the order.
But yeah, so Garrett, you are up first.
Well, let me read off some of the reviews here while we think about it and see what the folks on Letterboxd are saying. First up, we got this 5-star review. Dear Min, what is stopping you from being like Heath Ledger? A lot. There's a lot of things.
That's a lot of things.
3.5 stars. Heath Ledger dances down steps with giant leaps. Christopher Nolan. That's him. That's the Joker.
It was not that long after this.
5 stars. Funny how Shakespeare's been real quiet since Joseph Gordon-Levitt said, I burn, I pine, I perish. And then finally, 5 stars. The moral of the story is that all men are evil except Heath Ledger and Joseph Gordon-Levitt. And honestly, big mood.
Oh, man. I think this is going to be 4 stars, right on the nose.
Ooh, man.
Wow, what a guess.
This is pretty good, guys. Well, I don't want to go. I don't think. I'm going to do 3.6.
Yeah. A lot of movies from this time period I feel like are rated lower than you'd think. This one was the second most popular on Letterboxd. Dang.
True. I forgot about that.
I'm going to say, you said 3.6 and 4? All right. Let's go for chaos. I'm going to say 3.8.
Chaos mode. Okay. 4.0,
Right in the middle.
3.8, 3.6.
We might need a tiebreaker.
Here we go. Are we? Okay. We will not need a tiebreaker. We have a direct hit this week.
Oh, wow.
This movie is a 4.0. This is Garrett's win of the week.
Whoa. That's huge.
Boom.
Yep.
That's huge.
Yeah, it is.
Bring it on up, David, where I'm at.
Yeah, it
Did I
brings
get
you
you?
up to 19. Just ahead of Josh. Hang on. 10 things and 1 behind me.
Aw, snap.
10 things. I hate.
I'm coming for you.
19, because you were at 17. You jump over Josh by just a little bit, who just crept up to 18. And so that gets us, dead heat going into So Many Santas. It's 20 to 19 to 18. It's anybody's game, y'all.
Dang, that's crazy. Wow, can't believe it. All right, well, we will find out here in the last few weeks of the year where this is going to end. That's it for us on this episode of So Many Sequels. Be sure to subscribe here in our YouTube channel or in your favorite podcasting app to keep up with all of our reviews and news updates. You can also follow us on Instagram. Go to SoManySequels.com. You can find links to our social channels there, as well as all of our past podcast episodes. SoManySequels.com. Yeah, we'll see you all next time.